This is a Hipsters of the Coast podcast. All right, welcome to the Doom Travelers podcast. This week we are very short-handed. This is the summer season, of course, so people are traveling and or spending time with their girlfriends. So we are down Rich Stein and Matt Jones, and we are left with me, David McCoy, to host this absurd podcast. And joining me, the guy who actually knows something about Magic, Brendan McNamara. Thanks for joining me this weekend, B-Mac.
Howdy. Yeah, I almost wasn't able to make it because I was playing in the Magic Online Sealed PTQ today, but I probably would still be playing it if I hadn't been eliminated, but I was, so here I am.
Yeah, here we are. So this weekend was Pro Tour Magic Origins. It was in Vancouver, BC, just north of my hometown of Seattle, and I don't know. It was a pretty interesting Pro Tour. A lot of the expected decks were there. The limited portion itself wasn't entirely surprising. It was fun to watch as usual, but nobody made any obscene deck choices or crazy picks that drove Twitter mad. Yeah, I mean, the most interesting deck, I think, not necessarily the most successful, but most interesting was the Demonic Pact deck that De Leon, previous Pro Tour champion, showed up with. Did you get a chance to see that, B-Mac?
Yeah, it looked pretty cool. I remember seeing one game where he had like 3 of them out or something. I was like, looks a little bit absurd, but yeah, Demonic Pact, if you can, like, the basic idea is that you have the invasive species from M15 that's a 3 and a green 3/3 that when it enters the battlefield you have to pick up one of your permanents. And so you could just run out your Demonic Pacts, get your value chain going of draining life and drawing cards, and then you don't even have to cast invasive species. You can cast Woodland Bellower and then get an invasive species for free.
Yeah, and then you use the invasive species to bounce the pact and reset it if you choose to replay it.
Yeah, it looked pretty cool. It didn't look like it was especially well suited. Seems like if people are attacking you with lots of small red creatures and burning your face, the Demonic Pact might be a little too slow to make a difference.
Yeah. The other deck that made a pretty big impact was the Blue-Red and Soul Artifact deck that I believe a bunch of big teams settled on. I know Channel Fireball was playing it. So both Luis, Scott Vargas, and Efro were playing it. That deck, of course, is built around the blue enchantment and Soul Artifact that makes any artifact a artifact creature with base toughness 5. Base toughness of 5/5. So basically, you put it on a Darksteel Citadel, or you put it on a Ghostfire Blade, or you put it on an Ornithopter, and go to town. And then it also leveraged the power of the new Hangerback Walker from MTG Origin or Magic Origins. It's interesting, Brennan, to see how that deck has evolved over the past 3 sets now. You know, it's had the core of Ghostfire Blade and Soul Artifact Ornithopter. You know, it's had that core for a couple sets now, but it really seemed to take something like Hangerback Walker to make it actually viable in a tournament like the Pro Tour.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, those cards, like, and Soul Artifact is a very, very powerful card if you've got a lot of cheap artifacts to play. And, you know, Darksteel Citadel has been around for a little while, and Ghostfire Blade is very, very powerful. I mean, Ghostfire, like, Soul Artifact gets played sometimes in the modern affinity decks, and Ghostfire Blade got tested in it and was almost good enough. It's just, you know, you only really need 4 cranial platings. You don't quite need the Ghostfire Blade also, although there are reasonable arguments for it, including that it pumps toughness, and so, you know, you can Cranial plating is not going to keep your creature alive, whereas a Ghostfire Blade might, shut down an Electrolyze or something. And so those cards have been sitting there, like modern playable cards that can be quite powerful. And I think there just wasn't quite enough of a, critical mass to make it into a deck where you could afford to play that many bad cards like Ornithopters because they were just so good. And now you've got Hangerback Walker, which is just an amazing card, and is probably going to be played in lots of standard decks for the next year. And and they got like Whirler Rogue, which the decks are playing, which 4 mana, you get 2 artifacts. You can use the unblock ability. You could just you like if you get your opponent down to 5 and you've got something with Soul Artifact and they've got blockers, and then you play Whirler Rogue and just you could tap your Ghostfire Blade or whatever random artifacts. You don't even have to tap the Thopters you make.
Yeah, of course, it's it wasn't just Hangerback Walker that made it into the deck from the new set. They were also playing Whirler Rogue, like you said, but also Pro Tour finalist Mike Segrist was even playing the colorless land that you can sack to make 2 Thopter tokens.
Yeah, I was interested to see if people would play that card because it's really good. And the problem, it's funny. It's theoretically possible that it ended up costing him the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
Because the problem is you're obviously playing 4 Ghostfire Blades, and so then you're adding like a 5th colorless land in a deck that needs double blue and wants to have red, and sometimes wants a lot of red, especially if you're like trying to go off of Shrapnel-Plast. It's nice to have multiple red sources. And so it's just the mana is not as clean as it could be. And so then, and like Sigrist in his famous final game of the Pro Tour this year when he had to mulligan all the way down and he mulliganed to his 4-card hand, and the only land in his 4-card hand was a Mana Confluence. And he's playing against mono red. And I thought to myself, oh, I wonder if you have to play Mana Confluence in that deck, or if you just have to do that once you put Foundry of the Consoles in,
Yeah.
or something. And
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting watching the finals. So the for those of you that maybe didn't get a chance to watch it, the finals ended up being mono red, piloted by Joel Larson, who ended up winning against Mike Segrist, who was playing blue red and Soul Artifact, and it came down to a game 5 in which Mike Segrist mulliganed all the way down to 3, and LSV, who was commentating the final and also played the deck in the Pro Tour, was saying that you have to mulligan extremely aggressively with this deck because it's basically a combo deck. You have to have something like Insular Artifact or something like Ghostfire Blade in your opening hand. Otherwise, you're just not doing anything. And we saw that exact situation play out in the quarterfinals when Steven Barrios, the other blue-red and Soul Artifact deck in the top 8, he didn't mulligan his hands very aggressively. He kept hands that were full of just Ornithopters and Springleaf Drums and didn't do anything. And he got absolutely rolled over by a Green-Red Devotion player, or a Green-Red Devotion deck that should have theoretically had a very poor matchup. And so, as terrible as it must have been for Mike Segrist to mulligan all the way down to 3, it seems like that's what you're exactly what you're supposed to do. Mulligan to your combo pieces and hope you get there. So, interesting final.
yeah, I think that like that deck it's definitely weaker than the modern Affinity deck, in that you just don't have a huge critical mass of incredibly powerful cards. I mean, you don't have Plating and Arcbound Ravager and multiple cards like that are just game-winning cards. And so anytime you're playing one of these sorts of artifact decks, and like if you're trying to play in Soul, or have an Ornithopter plus something to make it better, that's going to lead to mulligans. And I think this deck is a little less consistent than like the modern version, and so it's going to mulligan a little more. It looks like it actually has some pretty good staying power in the long game. And that's definitely the reason why you would want to play Foundry of the Consoles, is that even if they wipe you out and like you boarded in Thopter Spy Network or something and they kill all your artifacts, you could sack it and get the chain going again.
Yeah.
But it does, I feel like it's not going to be played as much as it might be for being obviously one of the best, strongest, most top performing decks at the Pro Tour that also looks really fun. Just because people are not going to want to have to mulligan and lose games where they're just sitting with like three ornithopters in play, or
Yeah,
like they draw three shrapnel blasts and they do 15 damage to their opponent and then sit there and die.
yeah,
And the problem is if you're playing against a deck like mono red, you just don't have the time.
yeah.
If you're playing slower decks, I think that you have a little bit of time to maneuver and you can eke out some victories.
Yeah,
But
and of course the most played deck in the top eight this weekend was mono red. The mono red decks were already pretty strong with Stoke the Flames and Goblin Heel Cutter and Goblin Rabble Master, um, and uh, these new red decks have taken cards from Magic Origins like Abbot of Carol Keep, which allows them to exile the top card of their library and play it that turn. Card draw, basically, for a mono red deck that should not have access to it. And then they all took advantage of the new burn spell from Magic Origins, Exquisite Firecraft, which is basically a sorcery speed, 3 mana, 4 damage spell, which the deck lost. Well, the burn deck lost with the rotation of uh, RTR, the Boros burn 4, gain 4.
yeah,
Um,
Boros Charm
yeah, Boros Charm, and or
and like or Warriors
War Legious
Helix.
Helix and Boros Charm.
Yeah,
So losing those burn spells really reduced a lot of the reach that these red decks had. But Exquisite Firecraft, replaces some underwhelming burn spells in order to do 4 damage in one card.
and
Um,
it's uncounterable if you have Spell Mastery, which
yeah,
you probably have Spell Mastery in this deck,
yeah.
and that just makes it really hard for a control deck to get out of things.
Yeah, I mean these mono red decks, it's crazy how far red has come in the past
Yeah, I
few
mean,
years.
it's interesting because I remember, a couple years ago when I would pretty regularly read Mark Rosewander's like columns and his blogatog Tumblr and stuff where he'd talk about different things they're trying in design and directions they're taking, and they've obviously been trying to make red better, make it less one dimensional. I think the biggest thing is like adding in the exiling a card kind of card draw where you can play a card this extra card this turn, and that started with Chandra, Pyromaster, and like Abbot of Carol Keep is amazing. That card, yeah, I mean the fact that you've got a burn deck that can draw a card while also playing a 2/1 that is potentially better than Monastery Swiftspear as a 1/2. They both have prowess. And there's
Yeah, it should be noted that it does have prowess. That like being able to draw a card is very important, but prowess should not be missed on this card. It makes it very hard to block, and it can do a lot of damage when it draws you a burn spell. Um,
yeah, they clearly have succeeded in making red not necessarily the best color in Magic, but a very powerful color.
yeah, I mean it's
And I think
much
part
more
of the problem is
flexible than
that
it used to be.
yeah, I mean red has always been good. Like of all of the monocolor decks, red is the one that's almost always the first one available in a format. You know, there have been a lot of mono red burn and beatdown decks and goblin decks in the past, but now that they're starting to give them more versatile cards like Abbott and like Outpost Siege and these cards that can help them get ahead and not just lose if someone gains 5 life or 10 life.
Yeah,
Although
I
this
mean,
one may still lose if people start playing Feed the Clan again.
yeah, I mean the burn spells in for red have definitely gotten worse over the years, but the creatures have gotten significantly better. You have your heel cutters and your lightning berserkers and your Zergo bell strikers that have um, dash, and that ability for red to continue applying pressure with their creatures but not leaving them on the battlefield to get swept away or killed with sorcery speed removal. Like that is a flexibility that when I played mono red when I first came back to Magic a couple of years ago, like that's a red didn't have anything like that. You played all your creatures out and you prayed that they couldn't wipe the board. You played that Supreme Verdict was either not in their hand or they didn't have the mana to cast it. Um, Yeah, and so mono red is just significantly stronger uh, than it's been in the past couple of years.
Well, and it's interesting that mono red decks basically have won the last two Pro Tours.
Yeah,
You know, Joel Larson won with straight mono red this Pro Tour this weekend, and then the last one was won by Martin Dang playing Atarka red.
yeah,
And they're both, Martin Deng is Norwegian, Joel Larson is Swedish. They test together on the same team. So there's like a team of, Swedish and Northern European Magic players who have now won the last two Pro Tours playing red decks and perhaps seeing better than anyone else that, you know, red is really strong. And one of the things that I always go back to in Magic, and especially as I've looked into design of the game, is that look at what the game designers are trying to get you to do. Usually, they've gotten good enough that the things they try to get you to do actually work. And it's been pretty clear, for example, that red has been pushed and that they're trying to make red a more versatile and powerful color. And so you say, sometimes if you're trying to decide, which constructed deck do I play in this tournament, how's the meta game going to shake up? Maybe you just think, this looks like one that they tried to make really good.
hmm
I'm going to go for it. And it's worked the last two times.
yeah. I mean, like we can move on in a second, but what I found interesting about the mono red decks is the huge variation within them, and they were all very successful. Like for example, Sam Black was playing that 1 mana red enchantment that lets you discard a card to shock something.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
think
Molten Vortex.
I think Mike Flores was also playing that. Um, and yeah, it's just interesting the number of extremely powerful red cards that do. I mean, that's not a new effect, but it's just such a broad range of options that mono red has, and they're all extremely
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, you can tailor a mono red deck or like a red with a little bit of splash of green or some other color to whatever you want. And I think it'll be interesting to see, as the standard format goes forward between now and when Battle for Zendikar comes out. I mean, oftentimes this is kind of the dead season in standard because people are just waiting for cards to rotate. But you do have World Magic Cup qualifiers coming up, and the red deck looks pretty sweet. And standard PPTQs are going to be starting again in a couple weeks. I think at the end of August, and so I bet that it'll be interesting seeing people metagame against each other with the different red decks. Which version of a red deck works better against the hate that people are bringing?
Yeah,
It'll be. I think it's exciting and it looks cool.
yeah,
And the nice thing about red decks is usually they're not the most expensive.
for sure.
Even if like Exquisite Firecraft and Abbot of Carol Keep are going to be expensive cards, Lightning Berserker and all of those things, all the creatures are pretty cheap. Even like Zergo, I'm sure, is not that expensive.
Yeah. So just to round out the top eight, there were two Obzon decks. Obzon has been that people have tolled the bell for Obzon multiple times over the past year, but it always sticks around. Sperling was playing a more traditional Obzon control deck that he made the semis with, and then Yamamoto, the Japanese player who led the Pro Tour all the way through the Swiss, was playing a Megamorph version that has been popular since Dragons of Tarkir has come out. Nothing too new for either of those guys. And then there was, of course, a green-red devotion deck that took advantage of its opponent's lack of mulliganing in the blue-red and Soul Artifact deck. Anyway, so that was the top eight. It was a lot of fun to watch today. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, it was a good Pro Tour.
Yeah, but in the middle, there were quite a few announcements made by Ellen Bergeau, the organized play director for Wizards of the Coast. She and Rich Hagon spent about 15 minutes basically telling us what our lives were going to be like for next year. And they had a lot of interesting things to say. They announced some adjustments to the PPTQ system and the RPTQs, trying to tie them closer to the Pro Tours that they feed into. They announced the GPs, the 2016 GP season or locations. They announced the 2016 Pro Tour locations, all of that stuff. But the most interesting to me was the changes in the qualifications for day two of Grand Prix and the adjustment to how Wizards of the Coast interacts with independently organized circuits. Um,
Absolutely, I agree with you on this.
yeah, so in terms of the independent series, Ellen Bourgeau announced that they were going to be adjusting and I believe improving the number of Planeswalker points that you get from playing in these. Um,
Yeah,
I believe they were treated with a X1 multiplier, so you got basically nothing for them. And now they're being given an X2 multiplier, which will make them basically a good way to make up for the Planeswalker points you're not getting because of the old PTQ system. Um, like with the new PPTQs, you people are losing a lot of opportunities for high multiplier events. So it seems like SCG circuit will be a good way to make up those Planeswalker points. But most interestingly, it appears that Wizards of the Coast will be working with Star City and maybe even TCG to award Pro Tour invites at the, I assume for at least the winner of the SCG Invitational, maybe even the whole top eight. I mean, they weren't very clear, but this seems like
yeah,
a huge change.
yeah. That's what it sounded like. I think all of it's a good sign for SCG and for just tournament growth. Because it's true. Like here in Denver, there's an IQ, an invitational qualifier for the Star City Games Invitationals, like at least one every weekend, sometimes more. And so it's there's plenty of opportunities to play, but like I've played in a couple of them, and then you go and look them up on planeswalkerpoints.com afterwards, and it's just like magic and the date. And
Yeah.
you get a and you went 4-1 and like it did pretty well, and you got like 20 planeswalker points. And it's kind of like what a joke. And the same thing, I've never played in the Star City Open, but it was the same way. And I think what they said now is that like the IQs will get a 2x multiplier and the opens will get a 4x multiplier, I think. Um, they don't like say exactly what they're talking about because they're not going to use the terms that Star City uses. They're going to talk generally of independent circuits and series and the number of qualifiers and feeding events and stuff. But it sounds like it's going to be 2x for IQs, which is great because those are basically like a PPTQ, which get 4, by the way. But they're a similar type of tournament. And then if the opens and like the invitationals are giving a 4x multiplier, which is still half of what a GP gets, but those are relevant points. And if they do end up saying that like the winner of the Star City Invitational qualifies for the Pro Tour, I mean, so many of them already are qualified for the Pro Tour. So I think they may have been willing to try this out because half the people who win them are like platinum pros already.
Yeah.
And so it's not a huge risk. But I think that also goes with it that they didn't want to, give people Pro Tour qualifications and extra Planeswalker points if they didn't think the events were seriously competitive because, they don't have any control over them. And so in theory, like people could just invent events and use them to farm Planeswalker points.
Yeah.
So that people can get buys and people like, I don't even know, there probably would be unscrupulous tournament organizers who would just like let people pay them money and then not even really have a tournament just to get enough points to get your buys before the weekend or
Yeah.
something. I don't know if
I mean,
that's
this to me it seems like a product of Wizards realizing that the demand for Magic events isn't met by the opportunities that they provide. So the opportunities that Wizards of the Coast directly provides are the PPTQs, the RPTQs, the GPs, and the Pro Tours. And I think this is a recognition that those events aren't enough anymore to either satisfy demand or satisfy the Planeswalker point requirements that they've set out for buys. Um, like I know, one of our Brooklyn friends, Zach Orts, has had issues getting enough Planeswalker points for even one buy because the PTQs used to give you so many more Planeswalker points than the PPTQs do. So if you go to the same number of events, all of a sudden you're getting about half the points. and he's just fallen off the buy list because he's been unable to get enough Planeswalker points. And I think this is Wizards' recognition that they upped the requirement for Planeswalker points and reduced the opportunities to get them. And this is an attempt to fix it, but it also seems like an attempt to legitimize the independent circuits. I don't know if you had a chance to read Rich's multi-part column on improving the Pro Tour, but one of his suggestions was expanding the qualification system with multiple tiers. And this seems like a step in that direction, where you're not necessarily creating a new tier of ways to access the Pro Tour, but you're definitely creating a parallel tier in which you have an opportunity to earn Planeswalker points to get you buys, to hopefully get you a better record in a GP, and maybe get you an invite, but also directly get an invite to the Pro Tour, just an alternate route to the Pro Tour.
I think that's right. I think it's a good sign for the growth of Magic that I think Wizards is saying, we can't, we don't even need to provide the entire, competitive environment for this game. I mean, the Pro Tour for a long time was just, we'll throw money at this thing to make it, as a promotional item and as advertising and get people to play. And now it's to the point where I could see, assuming the Magic keeps growing or at least stays where it is and maintains itself for another 10 years, I could see, maybe Star City or other organizers just basically running the Grand Prix system in place of Wizards. That's the direction Star City is heading with their multi-day opens and all of their various qualifiers and things. I think it's a good sign. It's also a good sign that Wizards thinks that Star City is legit, and maybe TCG Player and some of these other circuits either will do well enough or people will be motivated to try to organize them. And if that just means there's more Magic to be played, and yes, you can go back to actually getting Planeswalker points again. I had like 4,000 Planeswalker points last season. I won a PTQ, and that was back when they still gave you 1,000 bonus. But even taking that out, like I easily surpassed the 2 buys. And now that the season started over, it's like I've got like 400 so far, and I'm actually having to think, what do I need to do to get back to having 2 buys? Because I've had 2 buys for at least the last 2 years, and it's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, PTQs, if you did well in them, were kind of like mini GPs in terms of the Planeswalker points you could get from them. And I know my 2 buys relied heavily on doing well at a few PTQs, as well as doing well at a couple GPs. But speaking of GPs, Wizards made a very surprising announcement. I don't think anybody saw this one coming.
No.
Which, is kind of bittersweet for a perennial 6-3 GP day one contestant like me. But Ellen Bergeau also announced that now the cut for day 2 will be at 18 points. I assume they will be 9-round day 1 still. So that means anybody with a 6-3 record or better, so like 6-2-1 or X2 or X1 or undefeated, will be making the day 2 of GP events in the future. This, I kind of wish this had happened earlier, as I'm sure a lot of us are. I've made day 2 of exactly 1 GP, but if I look back at all of my previous GP records, I would have only ever missed day 2 twice, and that's a bittersweet moment because those are a lot of drafts that I could have had for free.
Yeah, you have 6-3 a lot of GPs, and it's the worst.
Yeah.
It's nice that you get to play all day and you get a bunch of points, but it usually means you lost your last round, or maybe you lost the round before and then played it out, and you don't get to come back. And it's always anytime if I'm looking at the GP standings from an event after day 1 to see who made day 2, and then you scroll down to the people who have 18 points and you see a bunch of people and you say, oh, I know them. I feel bad for them. That sucks. Or I've been there before.
Oh God,
it's crazy. I mean, this is going to be a lot more people on day 2.
Yeah. Did you come to GP Worcester? Sorry, not Worcester. Worcester.
The Boston GP? I did not. That was the one where Rich did Modern Hero, right?
Yeah, that was the one where Rich became famous,
Yeah,
or
I
I
did
guess the
not go to that one.
culmination of his fame. But but yeah, that was the worst round nine experience I've ever seen anybody have. We had like easy 6 or 7 Brooklynites at X2, and just everybody lost. It was so brutal. Not that the X3 cutoff is really going to change it that much. There's still going to be people who get knocked out by getting their 4th loss. But Ellen Bourgeot specifically noted in her justification, for her in her reasoning as to why Wizards wanted to set the cutoff at X and 3. She noted that people were traveling for these GPs wanting to play, and they felt like with the increased attendance, like not enough people were playing on day 2. So what that said to me is Wizards is seeing a lot more of a festival, a slightly more casual atmosphere at these day 1s and day 2s. But the problem was a lot of the people showing up um, were not making day 2. Not enough of them, and so there were a significant number of people who were knocked out of the tournament and ended up either playing side events or leaving. And they seem to be recognizing that sure, you may be out of top 8 contention with 3 losses, but there's very little reason why you shouldn't keep playing. You paid, I mean, at this point, what is $60 for a limited GP? I mean,
Yeah, they're
you
not
threw
cheap.
$60 at the event organizer. You might as well get 2 more drafts for free. So.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that it not only does it let more people play on day 2, but it makes more games of day 1 relevant. Because a lot of people would go to a GP, and then as soon as you pick up your 3rd loss, a lot of people just drop, and they're like, oh well, my weekend's over. Now I'm switching into hanging out and doing side drafts and getting a card signed and things. And now I think a lot more people are going to play all or most of the rounds on day 1. And it just seems like you're getting a little more value for the trip, even if you're not someone who's you're not expecting to win or top 8.
Yeah,
That you can just you can play all 9 rounds. 6 and 3 is you know 5 and 4 is not that hard to do at a GP. 6 and 3 is still hard. Um, and so I think it'll be good. It'll be interesting to see like if there's 500 or 600 people on day 2 of a GP, especially for limited. I mean, it looks like they're doing less limited GPs now, or I don't know, but I don't know if they're actually less, but they've structured them so that they have one weekend, I guess, like right after it's like right before each pro tour.
yeah,
They have 3 different GPs in different cities around the world.
that are all limited. Yeah,
Yeah, that are all limited all at the same time. And so there's still have a lot of limited GPs, but basically, if you assuming you stay within one region, you have in the U.S., or in North America, you have one individual limited GP every season, as opposed to now usually there's 2. So that's a little disappointing. It looks like they're having more team limited GPs though.
which is
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, there's
Team
one in
limited's so
DC,
fun. Yes,
one in DC in March.
there's one in Louisville too, which is going to be a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
yeah. So if it turns out that it just means that you get to play one limited GP and then one team limited GP each season, or maybe six GPs a year. And then if you want to go to more GPs, obviously there's plenty of standard GPs. There's standard GP in New York City, and there's
Yeah,
one in Denver next year. So I
yeah.
may try to play in both of them.
GP Staten Island.
Yeah, that's why I said it's gonna be GP Terminal 5.
Yeah. Oh yeah, we could go play Terminal 5. We could go play. I was just imagining it at Fresh Kills.
Yeah,
They're
there's. It'll be interesting. I would be surprised if it's at the Javits Center, which is the big convention center in New York
very
City.
nice, big convention center.
Yeah, it's not cheap, and it's also not that easy to get to because they haven't extended the subway line out there yet. So you have to,
Hoof it.
hike a few or take a car or whatever. It wouldn't surprise me if GP New York City is in the same place as GP New Jersey was last year,
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either.
which is like the Edison Convention Center, which is geographically not that far from New York City. I mean, it's just right over on the other side of the water in New Jersey, but it still takes like 45 minutes to get there because it's that's just how New York is. And there's generally not a reason to want to go to that part of New Jersey if you don't have to. So they haven't built like quick rail or
Yeah.
anything.
Speaking of traveling, the final announcement of note by Ellen Bourgeot was that in order to address the fact that people in isolated areas were having to travel significant distances for our PTQs, there are now going to be two Moto RPTQs on one a weekend. So two different PTQs on two different weekends. Sorry, two PTQs, one on each weekend. So that if you do not live within reach of any of the RPTQs, you aren't forced to travel a significant distance in order to compete, which I think a lot of people will be very thankful for, especially since those of us in New York City, we don't have access to many cars, and they haven't done a particularly good job of ensuring public transit to the location of the Northeast RPTQs. So I think that's a pretty good change, even though I'll never be competing in them.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see, what the status of those Moto RPTQs are. Like, if it's only open to people who won paper RPPTQs, and then like maybe they end up being smaller because there are only so many people who qualify that way, or if they do some. I imagine that they'll have some online qualifiers for them also, so that they're good sized tournaments. But it's great. I mean, and it is really, really, it's always been really hard to qualify for the Pro Tour if you don't live someplace that's close to events. And now with the PPTQ system, it's become even harder because instead of having a few bigger events that you could travel to, there's just a bunch of smaller events that you just can't travel to. I
Yeah,
think that's exciting.
Yes, it is. Um,
They also want they had one. There's one other travel bonus that they put in that if you go X and two at a GP now, even if you don't make top eight, you get a plane ticket to the Pro Tour.
yeah, that's a good point. That's a
Just nice.
very important point. It
And
definitely,
they raised the payouts supposedly on the GPs.
yeah, it looks like it's not a significant raise,
No.
and it sounds like most of that money is going to be going towards the top eight prize payout rather than the min payouts.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's right. But that's good. I mean,
it's a good
right
sign.
now
It's
you
recognition that the current prize support isn't adequate, but
yeah, if you're winning $4,000 for winning a 2,000 person GP where you played 18 rounds, for that's I would take it,
yeah,
but
wouldn't say
I'd
no.
be happier if it gets 7,500 or 6,000 or even 5,000.
Yeah,
It's a step in the right direction,
for
and
sure.
it changes the calculus on the do you take the foil Tarmogoyf mask.
All right. Well, anything else,
There's a
BMAC?
siren. I hear a siren outside, which says it's time to go.
Oh yeah. All right. Well.
We should say, congratulations to Mike Sigrist, who's the Player of the Year.
Oh yeah.
He beat out Eric Froelich by like I don't know, however many points you get for coming in second in a Pro Tour instead of third. you know, so probably like two or three, and that was amazing. It was cool to be able to watch that. It was funny to be able to watch Eric Froelich was doing commentary. He had started 0-3, went 0-3 in his first draft, which is crazy, like because he's one of the best drafters in the game, and for him to go 0-3 at a Pro Tour draft is pretty surprising. And then he ended up in the whole tournament 12-4,
Yeah.
and
It was a sick run.
yeah, and so he made it so that the only way anyone could catch him for Player of the Year is if Mike Sigrist made it to the finals, and which he did. And it's kind of funny because Sigrist is tests with Team Face to Face Games, who has joined up with Team Channel Fireball. So he and Eric Froelich were on the same testing team, and they played the same deck. And I once like I don't know. I feel like it's a good story for Eric Froelich. He's become a lot more friendly, since like I played him in a feature match at GP Oklahoma City
I
like 2
remember
years ago.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was a little bit grumpy, and everyone thought of him that way. And he's done a lot of good work to become less grumpy. And he just got elected to the Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
and he's been playing ridiculously amazing Magic. And it was interesting to see him on Sunday. As like doing the commentary for the Pro Tour Top Eight, and he obviously wants Mike Sigrist to do well. The teammates, friends, and but he would prefer if Ifro maintained his or not Rookie of the Year, Player of the Year, which also would have made him the captain of the U.S. World Magic Cup team. And then they were saying, well, he's either got to come in first or second. And then the point at which Sigris made the finals, I was like, well, now you have to root for him to win because he's your teammate. Obviously, you want him to win. He's already gotten to the point where he's taken the prizes from you. You cheer for him, and then he loses in that painful
That's
game
so
5 where he
brutal.
falls to 3, and it's like, oh, you got everything except for the win.
Yeah.
but
Uh,
but that's
the
good.
the Hall of Fame election will soften the blow. I'm sure he'll be all right.
Yeah, he's doing all right in Magic, and he'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, this just puts a lot of pressure on Paul Cheon, right? He's the only one of that friend group to not be a Hall of Fame member.
Yeah, he's got some work cut out for him.
Seriously,
He started out, I think he was 6-2 or something on day
yeah,
1, and then went like 1-7
yeah,
on day
fell
2. And
apart. Yeah, I heard he was sick, but that's no
yeah,
excuse.
it happened.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's an exciting weekend, that's for sure. Thanks for joining me, be back, and I guess we'll see you next week. If you're looking for more, you can find us at doomtravelers.com. If you want to follow us, we're at Doom Travelers on Twitter. And as always, the Doom Travelers are brought to you by Hipsters of the Coast and casthaven.com. And I don't know, if I were rich, I would turn off the stream right now.